Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, November 20th through Sunday, November 26th, 2023. This week, I was really looking at the charts and looking at the planets, searching for the meaning. What is the main theme underlying here? But honestly, I think the theme is very simple. It is the transition. We are transitioning this week in a large way from Scorpio to Sagittarius. Sun moving into Sagittarius is probably the biggest part of that, but we will also have Mars moving into Sagittarius as well. So what does this mean? Both Scorpio and Sagittarius in the northern hemisphere are fall signs. They're autumn signs. They represent times, again, kind of in the northern hemisphere where the temperatures are plunging, and so that does have a pretty pronounced psychological effect on us. We become more passionate and things become more intense. Both Scorpio and Sagittarius are intense. They want to go all the way with whatever they're doing. They don't diddle daddle around. They want to go all the way, 100% or zero. There's nothing in between. So, these are somewhat extreme times. However, there are some very marked differences between Scorpio and Sagittarius as well. I would say the main difference is just the sheer amount of pessimism that we get from Scorpio and the optimism that we get from Sagittarius, right? Scorpio is I don't mean to disrespect any Scorpio transits or people with Scorpio placements. I love a good Scorpio transit. But this past month or so, when we're, going through the sign of Scorpio, it's more conducive toward intensifying in the sense of, our senses were heightened. We have been becoming so much more aware of our environments, not only mentally, but also emotionally and intuitively. And so I think with that increased awareness, there's almost like a pain or a trauma. Like, we're so sensitive to everything, and maybe cynicism is a natural part of that, right? But now, ideally we've kind of integrated a lot. That's what we typically do during a yin phase such as Scorpio. The Scorpio phase was kind of like the breath in, and then now we get the breath out with this yang phase, this external, more masculine, dominant, fire phase with Sagittarius. Sagittarius is an interesting sign because although it is a fire sign, for the northern hemisphere, it occurs at basically the darkest time of year. You could really say that Sagittarius and Capricorn share the darkest time of year, where the days are the shortest, the sun is lowest, closest to the horizon, etc. So how does that work? Having a fire sign at a dark and often cold time of year, how does that work? I think it's no coincidence that Sagittarius is mutable fire, right? So it does represent this burst of passion and enthusiasm, but that passion and enthusiasm may not be stable. It comes and it kind of flickers. This is the type of fire that, it may quickly go from a spark to a wildfire, but then it may fluctuate and go back down to like a campfire or something. Its nature is constantly changing. Sagittarius being a mutable sign, it's multifaceted. So it has more of a range of different manifestations that it can take, if that makes sense. So, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure type of thing with Sagittarius. Also, it is very interesting, although it's in such a dark time of year, or maybe because of being in such a dark time of year, Sagittarius is a very optimistic sign, and that leads me to one of the main differences between Scorpio and Sagittarius. Sagittarius, again, or excuse me, Scorpio, it has been more of a cynical time, more pessimistic in nature. Moving into Sagittarius, there's this optimism that comes. Okay, even though it's the darkest time of year, we're almost getting to the point where the light will start gradually returning in Capricorn. Sagittarius in the West, as well as I believe in many other cultures as well, this is a time for celebration. It's a holiday time. Often we had the harvest, historically or traditionally. So really Libra, and to some extent Scorpio and Sagittarius as well, Libra was really the harvest time, but Sagittarius was the time of, anything that you couldn't keep, anything that you couldn't like bottle or preserve, you had to basically just feast upon during Sagittarius, because it's not going to last through the winter, if that makes sense. So that's where we get this kind of tradition of feasts and, holiday celebrations, eat, drink, and be merry. That's what Sagittarius is all about. It's about that kind of, in a way, kind of abundance, which, again, that sounds weird because it's such a dark, cold time of year, but there is this element of abundance in it. So, even today in the West, we have this theme of holidays and celebration. Many of us are preparing for Thanksgiving in the United States. But also, even after that, I am aware that Christmas is, December 25th. Technically, that's a Capricorn holiday. However, you have this whole build-up phase before Christmas for weeks or even months, before. And so, really, I consider Christmas, in a way, it's kind of like a Sagittarius holiday because that whole build-up is largely occurring within Sagittarius. So, in other words, this whole theme of, oh my God, it's almost Christmas. I'm aware that not all of you may celebrate Christmas. That's fine. But it's just an excellent example of Sagittarius, holiday cheer and being so festive and merry and whatnot. That is textbook Sagittarius, okay? Anyone with Sagittarius placements, they're going to have that like holiday type of vibe year round, right? So I'm just giving you kind of this information to just show you what energy we are moving into now with Sun and Mars in Sagittarius. One thing I wanted to mention before we get into the forecast. So before we get Sun and Mars entering Sagittarius and, this new burst of Sagittarius energy, Sun will, of course, still be in Scorpio for the beginning of the week. And we will have a quarter moon that will be very interesting and very intense. It's almost kind of like a last like shebang, kind of like a little explosion. Nothing too intense, we just we've just gone through eclipse season. It's still fresh in our minds. So this is just a quarter moon. It's going to be nothing compared to what we've just gone through over the last couple months. But I did want to mention it because it will be enough to kind of shake us up. We'll get a little bit of that Scorpionic energy. Specifically, it's going to be a clash between the Sun and Scorpio with Moon and Aquarius, kind of clashing in a very interesting way. So that'll be one last event before we move into Sagittarius season officially. Okay. And then actually the last thing before I talk about the daily transits and such, I did want to mention I have changed some of my rates for readings. So if you're curious about that, or if you wanted to book a reading as well, check out my website. I will link it above my face somewhere. Check out my website. There's just information on readings there, and you can also book a reading directly through the website. There's a menu on the top right corner that you can do that if you're interested. Otherwise, like, subscribe. I really appreciate all of that as well. Okay, but let's get into the day-by-day forecast here. So we start out Monday, November 20th, and this is what I was talking about, where we get that first quarter moon. So remember, Sun is still in Scorpio, Mars is still in Scorpio. We're not yet completely enjoying the festivities of Sagittarius season. Mercury's in Sagittarius, so Mercury's ready to party and have fun. Although Mercury is, kind of estranged. It's in detriment in Sagittarius. We talked about that over the last forecast, I believe. So Mercury is kind of ahead of the game. Mercury's in Sagittarius. It will retrograde next month. We're going to talk about that later in this forecast. But anyway, so Sun and Mars are still in Scorpio, and already on Monday, we technically get a first quarter moon with the moon at 27 degrees Aquarius, making that square to the Sun at 27 degrees Scorpio. So this is a first quarter moon. First quarter moons I've often described as the most volatile part of the entire lunar cycle, perhaps even more so than the full moon. I really don't think the quarter moons get enough, not credit, but enough recognition. They are definitely intense enough to change our lives in a very tangible way. Specifically first quarter moons, even more so than third quarter moons. Why? Well, the reason why is because, we're still in this kind of first part of the lunar cycle, right? But when we get to the part of the cycle where the moon squares the Sun, the moon appears half full when it squares the Sun. It's called a quarter moon, though, because it's 1/4 of the way through the lunar cycle when it squares the Sun, right? So you can kind of like divide the pie, so to speak, into 4 slices. We're 1 slice of the way through the cycle, right? So this is basically the point where whatever we manifested 1 week ago when we had that new moon in Scorpio, right? When I was preaching, I was harping on you saying, what are your intentions? This is a time of manifestation, and I went on and on about how, the energy's in our minds, it's in the ether, etc. The first quarter moon is the time where we've manifested whatever energy, came down to us. It came from the ether, and it started to, a seed was planted. It started to cultivate something that was growing in a more physical nature in our lives, in the world. So this first quarter moon marks the time where that seed has blossomed. It has kind of ruptured from the ground, so to speak, And in doing so, perhaps something beautiful is being born, but it is disruptive in nature. So first quarter moons are chaotic. This is the time where we really see whatever we've manifested, whatever it is. And then that kind of spurs this growth, but also this need for change. So first quarter moons, or to some extent quarter moons in general, they can often be experienced with stress, anxiety, restlessness. I always say they don't have to be experienced this way though. Make some kind of change. Excuse me. What kind of change? In a way, this is also a great time for thinking about intentions, because you're going to need to be reacting to your environment. You can't just chug along and go, oh, whatever I'm doing is fine, I'm not going to change anything. You got to change something. There's some part of your life that needs to be changed. If you really think about it, if you get to Monday, November 20th, and you just say, no, I really don't see any need for change, there's nothing I want to change, I don't see any need for it, be active then. Maybe go on a run, a walk, a jog, work out, punching bag, whatever you do to be physical, even go like swimming or something. I don't know. Whatever it is that you do that. Do something to be active, because if you're just vegging out, laying around on this day with this type of energy, it's going to drive you crazy. You're going to be, that's where this restlessness and this anxiety will sit in. Specifically with this first quarter moon, the moon is in Aquarius, sun is in Scorpio. These energies are clashing. They are both fixed, but we're combining fixed air with fixed water. So they clash. They don't blend well. It's like mixing water with oil or something. They can mix, but they're not like truly mixing. They have these energies, each within themselves. They're each very strong-willed energies. They're not going to blend easily with another energy. So that's where you get this clash. But for more of an understanding on what this first quarter moon represents, we can look to the parallels, the similarities, the shared themes between Aquarius and Scorpio. Although they are very different, they both have to do with countercultures and individuality. Asserting our individuality. Both are kind of rebellious and provocative. Both are kind of weirdo signs, right? Both are misunderstood, whatever. Astrologers love to obsess over these signs because they're so weird or whatever, So that's the energy that may emerge from this type of first quarter moon. It may be very, we may feel very alien. We may feel very obscure. This can be fun. We can enjoy the weirdness. I think Mercury in Sagittarius accentuates this as well. Mercury's in detriment in Sagittarius. So detriment energies kind of go along hand in hand with this type of theme as well. Feeling unusual, provocative, something is kind of creepy, offbeat, off kilter. That's the nature of this eclipse. So, of course, to see how this will affect you, you have to look to where 27 degrees Aquarius, and to a lesser extent 27 degrees Scorpio, where do these points fall in your chart? That's where there is a need for sudden change, right? But on a more general level, I would say this quarter moon has to do with asserting our individuality. How do you fit into the groups? Whatever groups you are a part of, whatever obligations you've made, maybe with your coworkers, and I just mean like by obligations, even like habits kind of become obligations to some extent. Like, what rhythms are you a part of, with your groups? It could be like online groups, social networking, or any kind of like friend group or family. How do you fit into these groups? How do you not fit into these groups? Ideally, or in a perfect world, we by being a part of a group, we would not only not compromise our individuality, but being part of that group would actually accentuate, and embolden our unique gifts, our unique strengths. Because by bringing our unique strengths and our individuality to the group, we ideally strengthen the group. Okay, so of course that's kind of on an ideal abstract level, but that is perhaps more of the dynamic that we are evolving toward with this type of energy on this day, if that makes sense. So what groups are you a part of? What obligations have you made? Commitments, do these honor your individuality? Are you honoring the group, but are you honoring your individuality as well? Can you do both somehow without significantly compromising the integrity of yourself or the group? That's kind of the dynamic this is going over. On a more general level, it may feel freaky, it may bring obscure topics to the forefront, etc. Today we also have two other things we can talk about. Mercury is trining Chiron today. I'm going to make this very brief because this isn't going to be very tangible for most people. I just don't feel that Chiron aspects are tangible for most people. If you have Mercury very strong in your chart, or if you have major placements around 15 degrees of any fire sign, so that would be Sagittarius, Aries, or Leo, then what I'm about to say will affect you in a more personal way. But otherwise, you know, the first quarter moon is definitely the main focus of today. Okay. Okay, but what does Mercury trining Chiron means? What does it mean? I think it's basically an opportunity for having some very deep conversations about topics that would typically be uncomfortable. But today, you know, there is more of a potential for having those deep dialogues. You know, they could have to do with issues that are controversial, taboo in nature, or maybe heavy with emotion, you know, past trauma, etc. That was it. I'm gonna keep it that short because again, it's not an overwhelming. It's not drenching the whole day with its energy. It's really just kind of it's a little thing. The other aspect today we can talk about is Sun sextiling Pluto. So in a way, I'm kind of seeing a similar theme being echoed. Mercury in Dutchman, Sun in Scorpio being squared by Moon in Aquarius. All of that combines very nicely with Sun sextiling Pluto. They all point to things being kind of off-kilter, creepy, unusual. Specifically, Sun sextiling Pluto in Capricorn. It is a sextile, so yes, it's a harmonious aspect. However, Pluto is a dark energy. It typically brings up insecurities and, you know, power struggles, deep and dark truths that may be unsettling. So all of this may come to us in a harmonious type of way. It may come to us in an easy or graceful way, but it's still a dark truth, if that makes sense. So so it all comes together to show that Monday is really kind of getting us out of our comfort zone. It's really spurring us into action, kind of provoking us. Like I've said in past forecasts, you know, this day does have part of what I look for an ideal Monday. It is definitely stirring us into action, but it's perhaps like in a way that is a little bit uncomfortable or abrupt. I'm picturing being woken up like you're sleeping in bed and someone pours a bunch of water on your face, pours a glass of water on your face, and you're woken up. You're very alert and very aware. Okay, that's cool, but you know, it's a bit abrupt. So that's kind of the energy for today. Last thing I want to mention for Monday is that looks like just before noon Eastern Standard Time, Moon will actually leave Aquarius. So in other words, we're going to have that first quarter moon in the morning. Pretty much right after that, Moon leaves Aquarius and enters Pisces. So right away, the dynamic changes. We'll still have kind of that pent-up energy and that like aggression, irritability, the need for change. You know, all of that will still be kind of in the air since Moon is still so close to that square that it just made this morning from the Sun. But I do think it gets a little bit softer with Moon in Pisces. Moon in Pisces is just typically a kind of soft energy. It supports us in being very intuitive. You know, it's like hippie energy. Let's just let it all hang out and be ourselves and be very empathetic, right? And Moon in Pisces blends well with Sun in Scorpio. It's just that the aspect though is not, you know, we're not anywhere near a trine at all. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to move on though. Going forward to Tuesday, November 21st, Moon continues through Pisces now. You know, and right now we're kind of in between aspects between the Moon and the Sun. So in other words, Moon is no longer squaring the Sun, but it's not quite trining the Sun either. So it's, you know, we're getting farther away from that contentious energy that we had only one day prior, but we're not quite at the harmonious type of dynamic that will occur over the next couple days. We're kind of just in the middle. Like I was saying for Monday, Moon in Pisces is very intuitive. You know, let's be open with our emotions. Let's be so intuitive. Moon in Pisces is great for like picking up on deep patterns as well, and I don't know, being intuitive, seeing the patterns behind things. I don't know whether you're using feeling to do that or kind of just observing patterns. You know, Pisces is great at all of that. Moon will square Mercury, so that could kind of it represents a schism between our emotions and our thoughts, our mentality. You know, the mental energy is kind of clashing with the emotional energy basically. However, both are in these Jupiter ruled signs of Sagittarius and Pisces, so it means that right now we're really thinking about very deep sorry about that. We're focusing on very deep subjects, asking the bigger questions. How does the nature of our world work? Let's talk about metaphysics. Let's talk about, I don't know, philosophy. All this abstract stuff. You guys, you're interested in that, obviously, if you're listening to this. But for everyone in general, even people that aren't as interested in astrology, they may be more open to these types of topics with Mercury and Sagittarius and Moon and Pisces, for these couple days. One aspect for Tuesday would be Mars sextiling Pluto. Mars at 28 degrees Scorpio, sextiling Pluto at 28 degrees Capricorn. This is kind of a weird one. And I don't think this is going to necessarily dominate the day either. But Mars is still in Scorpio. Mars is at home in Scorpio. So that means that we're very aware of our desires right now and our ambitions. We know what we want. We know what we don't want. We know, relatively speaking, we know how to defend ourselves, how to protect ourselves, as well as how to advance in a strategic type of way. So now with Mars sextiling Pluto, these two energies, these two characters, Mars is, the warrior god, the athlete, right? The jock, he's having this very kind of beautiful, really great conversation with Pluto, god of the underworld, kind of this shadowy, very powerful figure, right? But they're having, they're very different characters, but they're having kind of this nice little dialogue right now. What that means for us is that, how do I put this? Our immediate drives and desires, which, I just said we're so aware of right now, those are becoming connected with much longer term cycles. So this could be a really great day for reassessing goals, or maybe commitments and obligations as well, but especially goals. What do you want for the long term? What are you seeking to achieve? What is your plan? There's this beautiful harmony between, the immediate desire, the immediate instincts, and much, much longer term wisdom right now. So great day for reassessing your wants, needs, goals, etc. Wednesday, November 22nd. This is the day where Sun enters Sagittarius. So for the next month or so, happy birthday, Sagittarius. It's your time to shine. If you also have Moon rising, any other major placements in Sagittarius, it's your time to shine now. This is your time of year. Whatever placements you have in Sagittarius, there will be a new beginning for you in that part of your life over this next month or so, okay? So we all have Sagittarius somewhere in our charts, even if you have no placements there whatsoever. There's something going on there in your chart, I guarantee it. So, new beginning in that part of your chart. Sun energizes wherever it is, right? Its energy is very kind of obvious. It's energetic. It's the vitality, right? So it's moving into Sagittarius. This also just represents everything I said in the beginning. We're moving into the time of celebration, the holiday, festivities. It's a very social time. Also, there's a lot of long distance travel right now. Sun and Sagittarius can also represent us being more interested in philosophy, these abstract concepts and things like that. Sagittarius is unique that it's intellectual, but it's also a fire sign. So it is as much about exploring the world in a physical type of way, physically adventuring. It's just as much about that as it is exploring with knowledge, wisdom, ideas, etc. Sagittarius really does it all. It has a lot on its plate. So to some extent, each of us in our own way, we are all going through this for the next month with Sagittarius season. This is especially true because Mercury's already there. So now Mercury and Sun are both in Sagittarius moving forward. Otherwise, Venus will be opposing Chiron today. So this is kind of interesting. I could see this going one of two ways, or maybe both. Again, I want to preface this by saying, with Chiron aspects, take it with a grain of salt. I do think they're worth mentioning. I do think they're tangible, but only if I really look for them, though. Only if I pay attention to them. That's just what I've experienced. So Venus opposing Chiron. On the one hand, I could see this being really beautiful because Chiron and Aries is we're all behaving kind of like infants right now. Not completely in a bad way. There's nothing wrong with being an infant necessarily, but we're all a bit volatile and we're seeing things in a very kind of simplistic way. So we're very focused on like, I'm hurt this way and I have these needs and, I'm screaming about it. Okay, there's truth in that. Speak your truth. That's great. Get your truth out there. Maybe that can be very useful. However, it can also be destructive and just create further hurt, pain, misunderstanding, trauma, right? So what does this opposition from Venus and Libra mean? Venus and Libra is pretty much the exact opposite energy. Venus and Libra is saying, let's consider everyone else's feelings and thoughts. Let's not get too intense or emotional. Let's like balance things out. Let's find the harmony. Let's all get along. Let's cooperate. It's thinking more about not what's best for me, but what's best for us as a group. Like, we're a team, right? So it's completely different than Chiron and Aries, which is all about like my pain, my suffering. Screw you. You need to listen to me, right? So how does this work with the opposition? Venus opposing Chiron. On the one hand, this could be channeling in some much needed, sweetness from Venus, some balance. Hey, yeah, I do need to speak my truth, but let's also kind of pay attention to, let's meet the person halfway that I'm talking to make sure that they actually understand me, right? That's what Venus is saying. Pay attention to your audience. Otherwise, how is your message truly going to be heard? So this could cultivate an environment really great for having those deep conversations. On the other hand, oppositions are tense in nature. One second. I had to blow my nose. They are tense in nature. So this could actually represent kind of a clash. This could represent a choice. Do I go with the Venus in Libra, which is a little bit more passive, or do I go with Chiron in Aries, which is more active? There may be kind of a choice there. So there could be kind of a clash there. I'm going to move on, though. I want to keep that brief. That's all I have to say really for Wednesday, other than Moon will leave Pisces and enter Aries. Looks like just afternoon Eastern Standard Time. So this does change the dynamic. Oh, and actually one more thing about that. What's really beautiful is because the sun just entered Sagittarius, as soon as the moon enters Aries, I almost said Sagittarius. As soon as the moon enters Aries, the moon will make that exact trine to the sun. So this is actually very beautiful and very powerful. With sun still at the first degree of Sagittarius, which, is a fire sign. Any fire sign starts a new cycle, right? In its own type of way. Sagittarius is kind of the beginning of the end. It's beginning the last third of the zodiac, right? So sun is at that very first degree of kind of a new cycle of Sagittarius. So as soon as the moon enters Aries, which in a way is even more powerful, moon at 0 degrees Aries makes that trine. It's extremely powerful having two planets at the first degree of their respective signs making an aspect to each other, especially a trine like this, though, and especially between the moon and the sun, which, of course, they dominate the skies. So what does this mean? Having moon trining the sun, very strong fire energy, very strong, stable, harmonious energy. It almost reminds me of Leo, even though the sign Leo is not really involved in this. But it's reminiscent of Leo's energy because it's bringing this like stable, almost like fixed fire type of energy. That's kind of what it reminds me of. This will be brief, of course, because the moon travels so fast, but we will really experience this Wednesday evening, and it'll go into Thursday as well. It's a really strong, stable, fiery energy. So being more passionate, being more enthusiastic, let's start something new. We might be a little bit more self-centered. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Seeing things from a more subjective, kind of simplified view is what's necessary to be more confident and more decisive. So that's what this energy is all about right now, okay? All right, let's go forward. Thursday, November 23rd. Like I was saying, we're still within orb of this trine. Sun at, 0 and then 1 degree Sagittarius today. Moon will be transiting through these kind of... it's still in the kind of beginning to middle of Aries, so still within orb of that trine, and moon is definitely trining the sun by sign, right? Sun in Sagittarius, moon in Aries. So really, again, strong, stable, fiery energy. It's not as acute as it was in the latter half of Wednesday, but it's still very much defining Thursday. So this is very exciting, especially if you have a lot of fire placements. You're going to be very much in your element right now with this kind of sudden burst of fire energy in the charts. But for the rest of us as well, we can enjoy the fire energy in our own way. Start something new, be a little bit more self-centered. That's not necessarily a bad thing. just because you're self-centered doesn't mean it has to be to the detriment of people around you, right? What if deep down you really want kindness for other people, right? That's where you get this kind of like bleed through of, you can be selfish but also giving at the same time. Fire signs can be very giving. I think they're the most selfish but also the most generous as well. So there's just more energy in general when you have these fire signs. There's so much creative potential, right? Aries and Sagittarius also love a good adventure, so we may be a little bit more prone toward, let's try something new, let's go out, let's do something, let's explore, right? That's what these signs are all about. All right, and I totally lost myself in my notes. Okay, so Sun will square Saturn today, though. That is a much different energy. So if you want to get technical, it happens early in the day, Eastern Standard Time. Sun at 0 degrees Sagittarius makes a square to Saturn at 0 degrees Pisces. Saturn is still at 0 degrees Pisces. Can you believe that? Feels like it's been months. But, okay, what does this mean? So it's very strange because on the one hand, we've got that dynamic I just talked about of feeling strong, fiery, passionate. But at the same time, we're getting this huge challenge and potential delays as well from Saturn. Saturn in Pisces is saying, okay, great, be your adventurous self, enjoy your own self-expression and individuality. However, keep in mind, like, how does all that fit in with the larger collective? You might be honoring yourself in a very kind of plasticky way, but Saturn is saying, this is Saturn talking. This isn't me talking, but Saturn is saying, are you honoring yourself truly, like on a deeper level, on a spiritual level, right? And Saturn's right, but this does bring about kind of a challenge. It does sort of complicate things. How do I honor myself in the moment and have a lot of fun and let's go out, let's do something? But also, like, how do I honor myself on a really deep spiritual level as well? I mean, in a way, these are kind of like two sides of the same coin. This is Pisces and Sagittarius that we're talking about. Exploration of the external world through Sagittarius, and then exploration of the inner world with Pisces. Can we do both today? Can we find balance, etc., right? We don't want to, how do I put this? Like, we want to find balance. We don't want to get too lost in the Sagittarius archetype, and we don't want to be belligerent and do all these things that, yes, they might create experience, and from that would become knowledge. However, like, what are you doing is, if you're too belligerent, you may be participating in activities that are crude or maybe even traumatic in nature. And yes, you're getting some kind of knowledge or wisdom from that, but at the same time, you may actually be destabilizing your own inner well-being, your inner enlightenment, inner soul, spirituality, right? So that's kind of what this is about. Can you participate in like exploration or celebration in a way that's truly holistically, like, aiding your own development, cultivating your own self-awareness and spirituality rather than like destroying it? Does that make sense? Okay, let's move on. This is already getting way too long. Friday, November 24th, Mars enters Sagittarius. We'll start there. So Mars enters Sagittarius, and I think this is exciting. No, Mars is no longer in domicile. So Mars was very strong in Scorpio. We could have that really strong Mars energy, I think that's a double-edged sword, On the one hand, we've been enjoying being more ambitious, more aware of our desires. But at the same time, like, those things aren't always good. Sometimes that can bring challenges as well. Mars in Scorpio makes us all a little bit more rigid and kind of defensive, right? So now with Mars leaving Scorpio and entering Sagittarius, no, technically Mars is not as strong. However, Mars does fairly well in all the fire signs, right? Fire signs have to do with individuality, self-expression. Mars has to do with those things too. Mars has to do with our fire, so to speak. It's kind of a fiery planet. If you ever see it in the sky, it looks angry. It's all orange and stuff. Okay, so now Mars represents the area of the desire, of the ambitions. It's been in Scorpio, so it's been in a very emotional place over the last several weeks. Now Mars is in Sagittarius, so it's showing that we're desiring to expand. Let's explore. Let's try new things, right? That's the general area of the ambition, desire, the drive, etc. Also, now look at the chart. We've got Mercury, Sun, and Mars all in Sagittarius. So we are fully in Sagittarius season. Goodbye, Scorpio. Hello, Sagittarius. We've got no planets in Scorpio anymore. And I'm not saying this to I don't want to, I'm not trying to say Sagittarius is good and Scorpio is bad. It's just more exciting and more fun. There's pros and cons to every sign, right? Scorpio is kind of fun in the sense that it's so intense and we become so aware, and you can have these really deep experiences there's so much to unpack there, right? That can be very invigorating. Okay. However, for better or for worse, we're moving away from that. We're moving into this kind of fun, happy-go-lucky energy of Sagittarius. So that's just how it is. I personally think that's fun. I enjoy both transits though. This isn't about what I want. This is the focus. So anyway, Mercury, Sun, Mars, and Sagittarius. It's all those textbook themes of let's explore, let's have fun, let's eat, drink, and be merry. Sagittarius is ruled by a benefic. The signs that are ruled by benefics generally are more focused on pleasure, self-indulgence. Sagittarius especially, it's ruled by Jupiter. So this is saying, it's everything having to do with excess and expanse. Remember what I said in the intro about, what did you cultivate from your harvest time that you're not going to be able to preserve over the winter? So it's about that excess, right? It's very interesting how these patterns kind of synchronize. They come to us from different places. And even now in our kind of modern capitalist society, it's all about excess, right? They're putting out all this Christmas stuff earlier and earlier. By now, it's been out for months, some of this Christmas stuff. But anyway, it's about excess, and maybe that can be bad, but it can also be fun to some extent. We can be a bit unbalanced with Sagittarius season, but it's in the name of exploration and YOLO. It's YOLO energy, right? That's what I'll call it. Okay, what else? Friday. That's pretty much it. Let's move on. Saturday, November 25th. Moon continues through Taurus now. I think I forgot to mention that late on Saturday, Moon leaves Aries and enters Taurus. So this is more stable. Moon is exalted in Taurus. This is if there is a best sign for the moon to be in, it would be Taurus, right? Because we've got that perfect balance of being very aware of our own needs, very aware of our own boundaries, but also being receptive and nurturing as well. That's Moon in Taurus. It's kind of that perfect middle ground. Over the past month or so, this was still an intense area because Moon was opposing Scorpio. But now Sun is no longer in Scorpio, so we can more so just enjoy the stability that comes from Moon in Taurus. This is especially a lot of fun on Saturday because Moon will cross over Jupiter. So this is really beautiful with Moon exalted and crossing over Jupiter. Jupiter's a benefic, like I was just saying. It expands things. It tends to make things easier. There can be some caveats. There can be some downsides from Jupiter energy, mostly just from the expansion, maybe having too much of a good thing. But generally speaking, all of this Jupiter energy right now, we've got technically 5 planets ruled by Jupiter right now, between 3 in Sagittarius and 2 in Pisces, plus Moon conjunct Jupiter. So really the main focus in my mind is Jupiter, Jupiter, Jupiter. So again, the only main downside could be too much of a good thing. Is there excess in your life? Is there too much of this or that thing? But generally speaking, other than that, this is a lot of fun. Jupiter says, hey, I picture Jupiter as this professor. I picture all the gas giants as professors. Maybe I'm weird, whatever. But Jupiter's the one that's you could tell he probably partied a lot back in the whatever decade it was. He's kind of like a cool teacher. He's a hippie teacher, right? He's not super keen on details necessarily. He's not the most organized professor, but he's a good time. He's funny. He's got jokes. He's fun, right? He's fun. So that's truly the nature of the energy right now. I think this is great for a Saturday as well. Jupiter's saying go out, have fun. Don't worry about anything too much. You worry too much. Let's have a good time. Let's have fun, right? That's what Jupiter says. Because on a deeper level, it's all about expansion of the mind and the heart and the soul. How do you do that? You do it by having experiences. The experiences are not all going to be good or bad. In a way, it almost doesn't even matter what you choose to experience. It's just about exploring and, seeing the world And then from those experiences, from the knowledge and experiences become wisdom, and from that wisdom comes like enlightenment. That's what it's all about. So that's kind of what we're experiencing throughout Sagittarius season, but especially on Saturday with this like, moon crossing over Jupiter kind of just makes this theme come up in so many different parts of the chart. Okay, and two things for Saturday. Mars squares Saturn. So Mars has just entered Sagittarius, so of course it's going to square Saturn at 0 degrees Pisces. Okay, so how do I put this? Mars aspecting Saturn is interesting because in a way Mars represents our immediate desires, and Saturn represents how we go about our very long-term desires. Mars is like a soldier, and Saturn is like a military general. I've heard other astrologers describe it that way as well. So I'm not the first one to come up with that, but that's a pretty obvious connection, I would say. So these two getting together can actually be very useful because you can say, okay, what do I want in the moment? But also, how do I honor that in the long term, right? That may not be easy, though, with this type of aspect because it is a square. So, in other words, Mars is saying, hey, I want this right now. I want exploration. Of course, it depends on where it is in your chart on how it will affect you, just like anything. But on a collective level, Mars is saying, let's go out, let's explore. I want to do anything and everything because, it's in Sagittarius. But Saturn, again, is in Pisces. So Saturn is saying, okay, but what about the deep truth, the deep meaning? What about your spirituality, your dignity? All this like more mature, deep Pisces type stuff. So the question is, how can you honor both, right? You may decide to choose to lean more one or the other, depending on, the way this falls in your chart is going to be unique for each person. So you may need to lean toward one or the other. Hey, I'm aware of the long-term ramifications, but I got to honor my immediate needs right now. Or vice versa. I got to put aside my immediate needs in order to create a better future in the long run, right? The choice is yours, and for most of us, it's going to be more about finding a balance between the two, right? Okay, and then the one last thing for Saturday is Mercury enters the pre-shadow today. So don't shoot the messenger. I hate to be that person, but we are approaching Mercury retrograde. You heard it here first. Mercury turns retrograde December 13th at 8 degrees Capricorn. So you may say, like, what? That's a couple weeks away. Why are you talking about this now? Don't rain on our, Sagittarius parade. We're trying to have fun. Okay, well, it's not necessarily a bad thing. None of this is a bad thing. Sagittarius entering the pre-shadow, it basically just means that right now, Sagittarius is zooming ahead. Look at the chart. Mercury. Mercury is way ahead of the sun right now. Mercury is, like, sun has just entered Sagittarius, and Mercury's already approaching the end of it. Mercury's like, peace out, bro. I'm out of here. But Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It can't get too far from the sun from our, perception, or literally as well. It just can't get very far. So what ends up happening is at this part of the cycle, Mercury is zooming. It's flying. It's traveling at multiple degrees a day, it just baffles my mind, every time. So what does that represent for us? Mercury represents the mental energy, the information. So right now, everything is happening so fast. We're in uncharted territory. The information is just coming to us faster than we can process it right now. This is especially kind of overwhelming, let's just say, because again, Mercury's in detriment in Sagittarius. So all of this like unique and unusual information is coming at us so fast right now, faster than we can process it. Also, just in general, our lives right now may be developing faster than we can process everything. So that's what I mean by Mercury in the pre-shadow. That's really all that it means. The whole duration while Mercury's in the pre-shadow, so in other words, between November 25th and December 13th, there's just too much happening for us to truly like appreciate and digest everything. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Be aware of what you can, and it's not about like fixating on everything and trying to figure out everything right now. Just go with it. It's fine. You'll get that opportunity to slow down and process things on a much deeper level when Mercury is retrograde, right? That's what it's all about. That's the whole point of it, right? Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna leave it at that. That's pretty much what it's about. So quick information, learning very fast. That could be one good thing about Mercury in pre-shadow as well. Learning very quickly, developing very quickly. Everything's very fast right now with the mental energy. Sunday, November 26th. Moon continues cruising along through Taurus. As it does so, it makes some pretty interesting aspects with basically all of the farthest outer planets. And let me try to do these in order. So, only yesterday we had Moon crossing over Jupiter. Today, on Sunday, we've got Moon conjoining Uranus very early in the day, like just after midnight, or very early in the morning. And then after Moon crosses over Uranus, it will then sextile Neptune just before noon Eastern Standard Time. And then late in the evening, Moon will trine Pluto. So in other words, like within the same day, Moon makes these major aspects to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. These are the three farthest, most outer planets in our solar system. The more of an exterior kind of outer planet a planet is, the more its themes become abstract, unusual, very on a larger scale. So they're more having to do with the collective. They're more having to do with the distant future, the distant past, long-term cycles, rather than our immediate moment, etc. To contrast that, you can see how the inner planets have more to do with, our personal experience, etc. They're more subjective. Outer planets are more objective. They're more like beyond, outside of humanity and our whims, etc. So with Moon making these three aspects to these three outer planets, it's bringing in that weird alien energy, that trippy energy. What is life? Pay attention to your emotions. It's very strange because Moon is in Taurus, so again that would represent being very stable, very grounded, having very practical emotions. But at the same time, we've got this like trippy, weird, abstract, holistic feelings, vibes, attitudes, information channeling in through our emotions as well. So I don't know, maybe just think about that, maybe play that back again, because I feel like that's the best way I could put it, honestly. That really sums up Sunday. So if you want to have fun, do it on Saturday. Saturday's the more fun day. Sunday's not bad either. It's just you may have moments where you're just like, what was that feeling I just had? Like, that was really weird. I know a lot of you, if you're listening to this, you're attuned to things like this. You have, intuitive insights. You have deep emotions. You're probably very aware of your emotions. So you, especially on Sunday, you might feel a little weird. And there's nothing wrong with that. There might be something really interesting there. But again, it's just not as like fun as Saturday, if that makes sense. So have fun Saturday. Maybe just kind of chill out Sunday, like read a book or something. Could be productive as well. Taurus has good work ethic. I don't know. So that's what I have for you for this week. Looks like a fun week. Definitely some developments. Next week, we've got a full moon in Gemini, so definitely stay tuned. Or I guess that's not really the right phrase, but definitely check in with me next week for the full moon. That will be a lot of fun to talk about. Also, Mercury enters Capricorn, so we are getting closer to that Mercury retrograde that will happen with Mercury in Capricorn. And it almost seems like we're getting toward winter, with plants entering Capricorn already. Pretty crazy. But anyway, I hope you have an excellent week. I'll see you next week.